for Police Reform Social Equity, Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you adding this to the agenda for today. And I have three points of discussion that I'd like to address. First, I have seen that the city is already taking action in some plans that we have in place. So my first question and area that I'd like to explore is how are we letting people know the actions that we're taking and how we are addressing issues of systematic racism in the city. And if there's something that myself as a commissioner can do to help get this information out to our networks to help amplify what the city is doing, that's one area of discussion. Second, I'd like to have a discussion on what we're doing to include our community, that we have the right stakeholders at the table to ensure that these things that we're seeing across the US don't happen in our city, and whether that is an opportunity to create a task force, a committee, or a commission on diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to city business. Would like to have a discussion on that. And then finally, want to make sure that we're keeping our eyes on and discussion top of mind regarding policies and procedures that either need to be reviewed or implemented to reduce racial bias issues or de-escalation techniques. And along those lines, maybe getting updates on our training requirements or our community policing efforts. Because I know we have tremendous relationships with the community, with mental health organizations and professionals to address some of the mental health issues and non-emergency issues, but just wondering if we've taken a look at how those are going, if they need to be strengthened, or what more we could be doing as a city. So those were kind of the thoughts that I had as far as this discussion. I don't know if, Mayor, you have staff that want to address those, or if we want to have this as a group conversation, but I just wanted to bring up those three areas.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your bringing those up. I'm in the process of putting together a mayor's task force on racism and systemic inequality comprised of citizens, and I've been reaching out to some, and we will be rolling out that task force very soon. The objective there is to have this task force of citizens begin looking at policies and come back to me and the commission with some recommendations for policies that we might be able to look at, adapt in our city. And so we will be rolling that out. And I forget what the other two were. If you want to repeat what the other.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Will we have an opportunity to give input on who we could suggest for that task force?
I'm happy to take suggestions if you want to send me an email with any suggested names.
Okay, great, thank you. So the first one was, again, following up on our communications efforts that we discussed in the last discussion agenda item, was there are efforts like this task force that you're creating. On the town hall, you mentioned that our police had looked at the 8 can't wait policies, and just wondering what we're doing or if there's anything that the commissioners could do to help to get the word out about the things that the city is already doing and taking steps.
Yeah. We can have the police chief come in and discuss the 8 can't wait, the policies that are already in place. It looks like I have him here. I don't know if he wants to weigh in now. The policies that are already in place. Happy to do that. I know Commissioner Schofield asked for that at a point earlier in the life of the demonstrations, and he was not as he was a little bit reluctant. Again, you don't want to start dancing in the end zone too soon, because all it takes is one incident in our city, and we'll have egg on our face. But can certainly at least update the commission and therefore the public on the policies that have been adopted. I know in various speeches that I've given, I have outlined the progress that we've made, but that's certainly worthy of a conversation.
Thank
Chief,
you, Mayor.
I see you're here. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that or not. He's muted. He may not be. And the other one was, I guess, communicate. Well, I don't want to put words. What was the third one?
Sure. The third one was really just talking about reviewing our policies, talking about our training requirements, just having a relationship or reviewing our relationship with mental health.
We lost you. You're muted, or we can't hear you. I don't know what happened.
Oh.
Okay, now it's better. Okay, going back, start over.
I apologize. Thank you.
Okay.
Just, I guess, having conversations, it sounds like, and I've seen you and your staff are implementing and coming up with ideas. I'm not aware of all of them. You know, the first time I had heard that our police were, compliant with the 8 Can't Wait was on the town hall. I'm just wondering if either we can be up to date on that or continue those kinds of communications with the community as well.
Yes, the short answer. I do see the chief has joined us. Chief Adderley, do you want to, I don't know if you've been listening to the conversation. I don't know if you wanted to weigh in or not.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We looked at 8 Can't Wait as, 8 is too late. I mean, we've been doing these, we had this in place over a year ago. I mean, when you look at all 8 recommendations, I mean, if there's something that you're recommending that we do in addition to putting it out on social media, I think that's already has been out on a number of outlets. Any suggestions on how we can market that better? I'm open to it.
I guess one of the things would be maybe a presentation like this at a commission work session about some of the community policing efforts that our stellar West Palm Beach Police Department is implementing and hearing about those, just in light of this being a topic that I think our community is invested in learning more about and seeing what West Palm Beach Police is doing.
Okay, well, I'm gonna just say, everybody talk about police reform, and I believe that since day one, since I've been here, I mean, reform has been, what are we currently doing and how do we do it better? We've done a pretty decent job, I believe, and reaching out to the community leaders and addressing their concerns. I mean, I don't know of any big pressing issue what's presently that deals with the West Palm Beach Police Department that put us in these categories that you see at these other police agencies that are currently happening and being criticized for. I mean, my agency is in the media now. They have a use of force committee, which, I created, I don't know, 10 years ago. But we didn't have body cameras 10 years ago. And one of the things that they did not do or included recently, once they implemented body cameras, they did not add it to their use of force committee. Well, we did that since day one, since we walked in the door. I mean, we have our legal advisor who has a group of people that we look at every use of force that's being a part of our daily operation. Anytime an officer uses force, it goes before our committee. And we have an attorney and a group of people that look at body camera footage, and we make sure that our officers are complying to our policies. When it's a violation of the policy, they make a recommendation to me, which I personally review, and we determine if this is going to be an internal affairs investigation or just one which our officer needs additional training. So that's just one piece of it. But I mean, we can have this discussion, and I think that one of the things that I think we need to consider here is we don't have big complaints here. I mean, no one from the public saying that we're doing a bad job. They're telling us we're doing a good job. I mean, I met last night with a group of residents from the North End, I mean, they have some very serious concerns about crime in their neighborhood. I think if you listen to the people that showed up last night at the police station and their concerns, they were pleased that we're addressing these issues in their community, and we're not creating a bunch of complaints to internal affairs and people complaining about police misconduct. I think that shows that we have a great group of people here that's committed to serving our city and protecting us on a daily basis. And they're doing it in a professional manner, and they're not generating complaints from the public. And we're taking enforcement action, and we're keeping our city safe. So, we can have these discussions, but, I hope if we're going to talk about some things, let's stay focused in the city of West Palm Beach. I mean, I'm not here to defend what's going on in Atlanta and these other cities that, they have a different perspective in how they do police work. I think I'm a reformed police chief. I've proven that. 8 years. Look at the things that my record did in the city of Fort Lauderdale and what we've done in the last year here. So I don't think we have a big concern when it says we have a problem with police reform in our city. I mean, that's just my thought.
Well, I think another thing, Chief, and I don't know if you want to get into it, even as you have handled the demonstrations and protests, and I understand that you all have actually sat down and met with the leaders of these various organizations prior to the demonstrations in order to map out a plan forward, which to me sounds very proactive, as opposed to just simply reacting to the events. Do you want to shed any light on that at all?
Yeah, I think that's a big piece. I mean, we have a relationship with a number of individuals, and I just want to recognize Commissioner Nearing, who put us in contact with one of the organizers who definitely, we have a great relationship with them. And, one of the things we need to be concerned of is, we got a lot of people that are not really residents here in the city of West Palm Beach that are coming here and they want to protest. Why they pick our city, I have no idea. But this is a lot of resources come into the table here. We're putting a lot of resources on the table for protesters, for people that are non-residents here in our city. And as you probably going to know, I mean, I'm not really preaching to the choir here, but we got some budget challenges here at this time, and a lot of resources are going to people that don't live here, and especially the ones that want to cause a disruption in our city. Like an individual, like a few weeks ago, I mean, I personally spoke to a guy who's from Chicago, and he was upset because we were protecting the protesters. So who ended up, I stood by while he was taken into custody, and we did everything that we possibly could. I practically begged this guy to just please step aside so we could do our job. And this is a man that flew in from Chicago, and he's living at his aunt's house in Lake Worth. And this is what our resources are here to protect. You know what I mean? So I think when we start looking at all of these resources that we're putting on the table and the job that's being done, we'll win these protests. We got a lot of officers that are being told things that are not very professional, and they're criticizing us about people that do our job in other areas of the country, but don't do it as good as that we're doing it here in our city. And we need to recognize some of our good police officers that are doing a good job and being professional about it. We didn't generate any complaints. I mean, we're doing a good job, and we're providing a professional service here.
Mayor, if I could just follow up, and then I'm happy to turn it over. I see fellow commissioners want to make some comments.
Sure.
Thank you. Chief, thank you so much. I concur with your comments that I hear a lot of compliments, consistent compliments from our neighborhoods about our police department. So thank you for that. And thank you to all the men and women who serve every day in that capacity. I think you just shared a lot of information that, maybe others weren't aware of previously. And so I would just ask that we continue that kind of information sharing so that, our community knows that we are proactive. We've been there. How did you call it? Didn't have to wait. We were already doing that.
Yeah. 8 is too late for us.
Okay. Madam President, I think you had some comments.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you to Commissioner Lambert for putting this item on the agenda. I think it's an important discussion to have. I know a lot of us have been having many of these discussions, not only over the last couple months, but throughout time to start to address some of these systemic issues. And Mayor, thank you for your leadership in putting together that task force. I think it will be incredibly important to have those conversations and include departments and police and fire and everybody to make sure we're addressing it as a holistic issue.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought everyone froze there for a second.
No, we're.
I think as it goes on, some of the things that Chief Adderley mentioned today with the use of force committee, et cetera, were things that I wasn't even aware of. I'm very fortunate to be involved with the police in the North End, looking at items like RECAP, the team that goes out and responds to any shooting or act of violence to offenders in the hospital to try to, bridge relationships and get them out of a situation if they're in one. Cops and Scholars, Coffee with a Cop, Shop with a Cop, Farm Share. These are all programs that many of us have participated in, are aware of, that are community programs that our police engage in, but many don't know. And I think at a time where nationally police budgets are under fire, it's particularly important in the city of West Palm Beach to understand what our police budget funds. We're not purchasing large volumes of tactical gear. We're funding officers that go out into our community and build relationships. And I think it's important to have those conversations about how we proceed down the line and what kind of things, we always have room for improvement. Sounds like we are starting to have those conversations too in engaging citizens. But, we communicate to the extent that we can, to the extent that we can amplify this, because I know it is something that is under the microscope. There are a number of community programs, even with our firefighter paramedics. We have programs that are community paramedics. We have community policing programs too, so I think sometimes we're all on the inside of what's happening, but from the past several months, one of the things that I had requested too was to try to get a better understanding for our residents, to your point, Chief, specifically for the city of West Palm Beach. What is happening in the city of West Palm Beach, to give everyone a level set from that place, to understand what their tax dollars are going to fund in policing. And it is for majorly staff that go out and really live in our communities, work in our communities, and really try to make a lot of things better. Again, can we have those improvements? Yes. That's why I think it's really important to understand where we are and where we need to go.
Okay. Very good. Commissioner Baduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I'd like to say thank you to Chief Adderley and your men and women of the West Palm Beach Police Department for doing just, I think, a stellar job in the last couple of months. I can only imagine how difficult it is to be a police officer today. I'm a former reserve officer of 10 years, and I never had to deal with this type, with this climate that seems to be unfortunately so anti-police. I certainly I understand that reforms are necessary in policing in general, and I think that we need to address the plague of systemic racism. But at the same time, we have to recognize that we seem to be the epicenter here, in Palm Beach County, and yet our police department is just on the forefront and has been for some time on implementing reforms timely and doing things in the correct way. I'm sure there's always going to be some bad apples. There's always going to be an incident, you know, and unless and until you've been out there carrying a gun and have someone pull a knife or a gun on you, and you just want to get home to your kids and your families, you're not going to understand what it's like to be a police officer out there. It's a difficult job, and in this climate, it's even more difficult. So I want to thank the police officers, the men and women of the West Palm Beach Police Department, you, Chief Adderley, Chief Morris, and the rest of our officers, and say that I'm here to support you. I'm also here to recognizing, though, that there are reforms that are needed systemically and in police departments around the nation, but you guys are doing a good job. I'm sure there's room for improvement, but I do recognize that you guys are doing a good job in a difficult situation. So thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Naring.
Thank you. Thank you. So first of all, I'm very supportive of a commission work session where this issue and item is independent. While I appreciate, with all due respect, appreciate the staff who presented on smart loading and traffic calming. I do believe that this issue deserves its fair time and an independent time, if you will. The second piece is, you know, from my vantage point, this is not an indictment on our men and women in uniform. That this is about a consciousness that, you know, quite frankly, has never existed in this country. And West Palm Beach is a capital city. I mean, it's a reason why I chose to live in West Palm Beach versus, and I won't name them, other small cities throughout Palm Beach County. And so I am not surprised that folks who want to express their views see West Palm Beach as the place and platform for that. You know, I understand, to your point, Chief, you know, the budget constraints and other things, but, you know, obviously we can't stop that, and it comes with the territory. I mean, we are West Palm Beach, and I'm very proud of that we can kind of be that platform, if you will. I'm not talking about the bad actors, definitely not talking about them. I'm talking about people who want to express their viewpoints and vantage points. You know, I think police reforms or the reimagining, if you will, is just one aspect of it. I think, you know, education, healthcare, housing, all of these all have deep-rooted inequalities that I think the city plays a role in. And quite frankly, I'm gonna say it again, I think the disconnect and the appeal that I have tried to make with the administration and you, Mayor, is I think what you hear, and I don't want to speak for any other commissioner, what you hear is a desire to, if we could, where we agree to make a united front as it relates to these issues versus, you know, each commissioner out doing their own thing, trying to wrap their arms around this. And so you mentioned this morning about a committee, and I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact term. Again, not that it needs to be, and you know, administration doesn't have to update me on that. But it'd be nice to be included in that process. It'd be nice to know without asking that commissioners could actually put forward names. And maybe that's not the way it was intended, which is fine too. I'll take that. But I think that's the appeal that I continue to make, understanding the strong mayor system, understanding that this administration has to take the approach that it feels it should. And I'm totally supportive of that. But again, I want to just harken back to this consciousness that we've never seen before in this country. And so there is no playbook for this. There is no, you know, we'll do it and handle it the way that we, and at least in my opinion, the way that we have handled other issues. This is truly, as it was with COVID, flying the plane and building it at the same time. And I just have felt like, especially when it comes to this issue, as a commissioner, as someone who is out and about, I'd love to be supportive. I've, you know, Chief, you know, I've reached out to you many times, including sending folks who have wanted to protest and they have the right to do that. I've asked them directly to call you, Chief. Can you call Chief? Here's his cell number. Can you call him and talk through it with him? So again, I don't know how else to make that. I think I need to just understand that that's probably, and again, this is me talking, this is my thought on it, that maybe that's just not the approach that we're going to take on this. We're not going to have that COVID-19 effect that, you know, folks are just having. I'll need to just kind of figure out where I lie in this and take the approach as a commissioner, as much leverage as I have to kind of support it. But I want to be super clear that I support our men and women in uniform. This is not an indictment. My son was a police explorer for 4 years and has desires to go into law enforcement. And I told him, absolutely, you be the change, you know, absolutely, you know, do what you need to do when it comes to that. So, I think I'm rambling, but the point I'm really trying to make is, again, we are at a unique time, an inflection point, not just in this country. And so to your point, Chief, I'm focusing on West Palm Beach, and we're at an inflection point in West Palm Beach, and we have, there's a spotlight and an attention that we've never had before. And I'd love to be able to take it from a unified approach, meaning, you know, having administration, having our commissioners who I don't speak for any commissioner other than myself, but I think would be on board with, you know, moving this issue forward. And of course, including our men and women in uniform, but there's so many other issues when it comes to city, again, to our city in terms of, again, you know, housing inequities, healthcare, education. So this is a broader issue in my mind, but I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to, again, having some time where we really can dig through this and hear just in these, you know, this is was supposed to end at 10:55 and move on to budget. So we've had about 25 minutes to talk about this. I'd love to be able to set up a commission work session where you, Chief, talk about some of the great things that are happening. And again, we as commissioners, or at least I as a commissioner, be able to then take that information out to the community beyond what's just happening kind of in, you know, so out when I'm out at Publix, when I'm out, you know, hopefully soon in my local faith organization, to talk about the work that we're doing, to talk about your leadership, and beyond that, beyond policing in this city. So those are my comments.
Okay, first of all, the budget portion of this has been canceled, so we have more time than I thought that word had gotten out to all of you. But as to, and I just wanted to clarify, the task force that I'm putting together will look at a number of areas, and it was not meant just to focus on the police. I'm, you know, going to look. I want the task force to dig into inequities in the area of health, housing, economics, finance, and industry, education, as well as civil and criminal justice. So they will have a pretty full plate, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing what they may come back to us with. So we will be rolling that out, and as we roll it out, we will certainly get word to you, commissioners, as to their scope of work. Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I was kind of thinking as we're all talking here, I think the structure that you set up for the CRU team was really welcomed. I know by this commissioner, it seemed like by my fellow commissioners, and I think that it showed great leadership in the kind of structure that was set up. And I know it was very robust. It was done very quickly, but I think we execute and continue to very effectively. I know I, as an individual commissioner, when it comes to this issue on a whole, have done what I can to carve out a small sector. I did economic recovery in the COVID unit. And so I've kind of carved out from my personal purview of focusing on creating economic opportunity. I'm working with groups of minority-owned businesses to try to make connections to get those opportunities, because I feel economic equity is part of this bigger equation. So I use that as a small example of a task that I've taken on to be part of what could be a larger team at your discretion, Mayor, to put as this task force. I think the citizen input is really important in this, But if there was a way to recreate somewhat of that structure where each one of us had a category or a lane, if you will, and that way we could all work together as a team. I think we really have shown that the proof is there with the COVID recovery team. If there was some semblance of that structure that we could put together, whether it comes down to economic opportunities, housing, even if it comes to, taking a look at what can we do to have visual displays of Black Lives Matter artwork throughout our city, just different visual points that really help. If there was a way to create that similar structure with categories that pertain to this issue and maybe fit as a whole to your task force, it's something that would certainly be welcome for me. And, I just want to go on record here that I want to be there at the table with you, my fellow commissioners, and working together as the city of West Palm Beach and showing that leadership. So to whatever extent that we can create that structure, I would be supportive of moving forward in that direction.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And certainly as a legislative body, depending on what comes out of the task force report, there will be ample opportunity for you as a legislative body to work on adopting specific recommendations. So we will, there will be work for you to do, no question about it. But I certainly wanted to get the task force rolled out so that they can begin their scope of work and get back to us. So you'll be hearing more about that. If you have names that you think might be appropriate, certainly get them to me and I'll take those into consideration. Anything else on this particular item? I know there was a desire to kind of spend more time discussing it. So as I said, the budget portion of this work session has been delayed. So if there's some more that you all want to talk about on this, please, we've got some time on our hands.
Mayor, if I might, I think,
Yes.
Just to bring it back to the reason why I had asked for this to be on the agenda was to get regular updates at your, how you feel that might be best delivered to us, whether that is press releases or at a commission work session, or I'm not sure, as they get rolled out possibly. I think that is definitely a common theme that I've heard from everyone who spoke on this, is that we recognize that you and the administration and the staff are doing some really great things. We just want to help be a part of that and help get the word out as well.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate that. Commissioner Baduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's a great idea that commissioners be, able or permitted, if you would consider, the suggestions for that task force or that citizens committee. I would just ask that if it's going to be focusing on police use of force issues and the like, that you have some people on there that understand the realities of being out on the street. Also, it needs to be a mix, but I wouldn't want to see it just citizens, because in talking to even my friends, while I can sympathize with some of the things they talk about with law enforcement, you can tell that there's just a lot of misinformation out there about what's even being taught in the academies and what our law enforcement officers are expected to do on the streets. The use of force continuum or matrix, there's a lot of misinformation out there on that. I would just ask that there be a balance, that there be some representative of the law enforcement community, that are people out there having to deal with the realities of being on the street.
Duly noted. Commissioner Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment, and say thank you to Chief Adderley for joining this discussion today. I agree there were many things that you talked about today that I wasn't aware of. So this has been, very helpful. And I just wanted to mention about the task force. I think, so much of what we're talking about now, in the spotlight are police issues. But, from what I hear in the community, they think the police are doing a great job. Chief Adderley is always walking around the city in different neighborhoods. People know him. I only hear, great compliments about our police. What I hear more about, in terms of systemic racism issues that are stemming more from, people that live in the historic Northwest and their garbage is not picked up at the same great as, say where I live in Rosemary Square, or that there are raccoon issues that are not being dealt with, or that, there are just not street signs on many different streets that I've heard that have been asked for a long time. I think that might not happen where I live in Rosemary Square because things are, much more quickly implemented. So, I think that I would hope that your task force looks at all of those kinds of issues as well. These quality of life issues that really affect neighborhoods in different ways. So I am obviously new to the commission. I'm not entirely sure how long it takes to get a street sign, or, how I can, help make some of these processes a little bit quicker for my community. But, I would hope that your task force might just look at how different neighborhoods are treated, or how, the things, just their services, if it's, things are being done, on a different timeline. I would just, like to learn a little bit more about that, and to make sure that these equity issues are really being looked at and addressed, and that we can be treating fairly all of our neighborhoods for just their everyday concerns. So thank you.
And that's fair, but let me tell you, Commissioner Fox, if you hear things like that, you don't need to wait on a task force to address them. Bring those to our attention. If there are specific concerns, quality of life issues that need to be addressed, by all means, bring those to the city administrator's position so that we can address those immediately. While we will certainly look at, the task force will be charged with looking at broader systemic issues. If you have a specific concern from a specific neighborhood, please, you don't need to wait on the task force report to deal with that. But yes, your point's well taken. They will be charged with looking at broader issues and categories of disparity throughout our city, and coming back with some recommendations. Commissioner Neri.
Thank you. So I'm happy to hear the broad approach, which I think obviously is an appropriate one, regarding the task force and just how we think about this work. Specifically to our police force, I think it was the late Governor Lawton Childs who said it's a poor frog that doesn't croak in its own pond. And I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can, we're on this communication theme, if we can both, I think can run parallel, both while we are always constantly trying to get better, because I think that's every department. I hope that there's no department, police, development, administration, no department that believes that it has arrived, including the commission. All of us are on this journey to get better. So I think, running parallel to that, we can also highlight, because I think this is the piece that I've at least heard from the community, is like what's happening on some of these issues, so that, 8 can't wait, and really digging into that. The Citizen Review Board, and Chief, I know you talked about it a little bit today. You said our committee, and I don't know what that exactly means, and I don't know that we need to do it on this particular forum, but at some point where we're really digging into that, because to your point, Chief, I do believe we have a great police department, and I believe that we also can build on the work that we're currently doing on this journey to get better. But part of that is how is it that we are communicating this out to the broader public, especially in this moment where everything is raw and people fill in the blanks, the absence of information, and people fill in the blanks. It's as simple as that. And so as best as we can, and any way that as a commissioner, I can help support that. But I think that that is really important, especially for our police force, because you lead it, Chief Adderley, and I'm sure you know all the warts, or if you don't, you have folks that you have issues or systems in place to figure it out. But no better, I think, spokesperson than having you, as you always have, kind of talk about some of these successes and how we can continue to build on that, and how the community plays a role in it. So again, everything that we've talked about before when it comes to our men and women in uniform and what's happening at our police department, how is it that we're getting that information out? Because again, maybe 6 months ago, it was more lip service, and there's no judgment there. I mean, it just was. It was a different time in this country. And I think now, and I'm happy about it, I think now that we have the spotlight, to your point, Chief, in 10 or 15 minutes, you've educated at least me on several things that I didn't realize that were happening. I can't imagine if we can get that out further in the community. And again, running parallel to that, maybe not in all the details, but talking about how it is that we'll continue to build on this. And again, even on our best day, understanding that we can be better. So thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Questions, comments? Seeing none,